people, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about supervisors. So, during clinical training, your supervisor will become your best friend. You know, they will become, in certain cases, they will become a mentor, a teacher. In other cases, they're going to become a colleague. One of my favorite couple of supervisors were actually about 10 years older than me. And I felt like we really bonded because, you know, we were closer in age, but they already had the experience. I did have a couple of other supervisors who were significantly older than me, and we were even able to develop a professional colleague relationship. And these relationships with your clinical, practicum, internship, supervisors, even, I really hope that y'all have like a better advisor than I did, but even your advisors, like these relationships are really, really good and strong, and they should be kept strong. And of course you're gonna bump heads because you work together, and that's what happens when you work together. But if you go in like, you know, ready to soak in the knowledge, ready to drink from the fire hose, what supervisor isn't gonna love you, you know? It might be challenging. I did talk about this in the past. It might be challenging because a lot of times clinical supervisors and advisors and professors, they're sometimes a little detached, and they kind of they don't really act their age, and by not acting their age, they actually act older than they actually are, just because of the work environment. So keep that in mind, that might be some of the areas of issues. Also, too, sometimes clinical placement supervisors don't necessarily understand where you are in the learning process, so that also creates issues and has created issues for a couple people I know. But it's good to be open and honest, and as long as you're willing to drink from the fire hose, that's all that matters. Be yourself. Go out there and try new things, okay? And be willing to take criticisms. So that's your responsibility as a student. Now, when you begin working, even when you're entry level, you do have rights. You do have because think about it, like now you're getting paid, they're taking money out of your taxes, sometimes they pay for your insurance, you have responsibilities as an employee. So when you enter into that world, like your entry level first day on the job, like, yes, respect your elders, but know that you have rights too. And I'm saying that because I see way too many music therapists who are used to drinking from the fire hose, are used to like going in there, like bowing down to their supervisor and asking for feedback. And that's very, very appropriate, especially when you're in clinical training. But it's not appropriate when you're working, because now you're an employee. Now you have rights as an employee. You have a voice. You should have a voice as an employee. So, and your supervisor usually doesn't know what's best, because in most situations, as a music therapist, your clinical your supervisor at your facility is going to be a creative arts therapist or a nurse, or sometimes even a healthcare administrator. So if those roles are your supervisors, you should not be bowing down to them, because they don't know anything about music therapy. Like I mentioned before, the only people that actually know what music therapy is are music therapists and doctors of osteopathic medicine. Those are the only two people that actually know what music therapy is and how valuable it is. Everyone else doesn't know, okay? So, and it is at work, not in your personal relationships, but at work, it is your responsibility to advocate for yourself and show that you are an asset to everybody, because nobody is going to know what music therapy is, or who you are, or that you're smart. You know what I'm saying? So, anyway, in my situation, I listen, I had a really rough time transitioning from, I thought I had a rough time transitioning from school to clinical placement. No. I had a really rough time transitioning from clinical placement to working, because when you start working, being a music therapist, and this kind of goes with that, like this goes for a lot of different disciplines too, nursing, business, finance, like that. When you're in school, you think that the activity itself is the hardest thing. You think that music therapy is really hard, and it's hard to implement, and it's hard to think about, and it is. But when you start to work, actually the work drama and the relationships and the people, actually, like the staff, actually are more of a struggle than being a music therapist. And that's something that I wasn't prepared for, and let me tell you, that is something that I have zero tolerance for. Now, as a manager, I can say that, I can say, which I've had in the past, like, I don't like your attitude, I don't like how you suck up to the boss, yet you suck in general. Like, I don't like the fact that you come in here all like late, not wanting to be here, and then all of a sudden when so-and-so walks in the room, your whole attitude changes. Like, I don't have patience for that. As a manager, I can say stuff like that. I can say that your attitude, the drama, you as a person, you are harming my facility, you are harming the clients, you are not being positive to this company. Okay, so I say all that stuff. I don't hold back. I'm a sharpshooter, like I told you, especially in terms of healthcare, because we're not necessarily dealing with, it's not a finance office where like people interact within the department or within the company. Like, we're not only are we interacting with each other, but we're interacting with patients, and we can't have any sort of drama or like stuff or attitudes or any of that stuff going on, because then how are we supposed to work as a team and help the patients? So as a manager, I have no tolerance for stuff like that, and I say how it is. But when you're entry level, it's not always important. It's not always good to call people out because you're entry level, even when you want to. And I learned that the hard way. I wouldn't say my story here, my tea time, I wouldn't say that I was mean. Like, I wasn't one of those entry level people that went in acting like they were tough shit, but like, because I am shy, and believe it or not, I really don't have that much confidence. You can thank my high school for that. But, yeah, so, like, I was scared, but I don't necessarily, like, take charge because I feel vulnerable. I just often speak my mind. And I, like I said, I don't, like, handle junk very well, especially when patients are involved. So, this girl that I worked with, we actually ended up sharing an office at the facility. She was old. She was 10 years older than me, and she was one of those, she wasn't nothing, to be perfectly honest with you. She was one of those, no, you know what, I'm going to stop myself right there. See what I mean? I'm a sharpshooter. No, but, she was one of those people that talked the talk but didn't walk the walk, okay? Like, she talked about all the wonderful jobs and experiences she encountered, but she only really encountered one experience, one really awesome experience. She wasn't the smartest of students, so she wasn't a therapist, okay? But she took the therapy courses, and let's all be honest, undergraduate psychology courses are jokes, okay? So that's what she took, and she took it at some no-name school, so we all know that also means that it was a joke. And so she wasn't very smart. That's like the point that I'm trying to make academically, and that's fine, But I'll be honest, it did kind of bother me that, like, we had the same position, and I went through all this clinical training, and she didn't. And I found out how she got the position. Well, she's a sweet talker. She definitely sucks up, and she definitely acts. How do I say this? This girl, she was very, very good at working. And by working, I mean she was really good being buddy-buddy with the people she needed to be buddy-buddy with. You know, she was really good at sucking up to the appropriate people at the appropriate times. This is the stuff that you got. This is the stuff you got to look forward to when you get that first paycheck. This is why we need to get paid $30 an hour, because we have to deal with stupid people like this. Anyway, so we shared the office, and we did butt heads a lot. And I'll be honest, like, I did have a personal, like, why are you even here? You're not even, like, you're not a therapist. You're a piece of garbage, and your sessions really aren't that great. You just suck up to the supervisor, and that's why you're here. And I don't, as a professional who wants to grow and is passionate about acquired brain injury and actually wants to do research in a neuroscience lab and go off to school. At that time, I wanted to get a PhD in neuroscience. I didn't want to be a doctor, but the point is that I wanted to go off and educate myself like beyond normal. And I'm sitting here next to this person who barely got their bachelor's degree. Like, she was literally the C's get degrees, that was her. And it just really irked me. But the point that I'm trying to say is that I didn't necessarily like when she took charge. I didn't necessarily like when she tried to, like, teach me the ways, because it was like, you know, we're the same discipline, and I know I'm, like, actually age-wise I'm younger than you, but I know more, I experienced more meaningful experiences than you did. So you need to stop talking to me that way. And it got to the point where we did end up having a fight, and I did, again, talk to her individually. And I called her out, and I said, you know, when the supervisor gets here, this is what I said. I was like, when the supervisor gets here, you better tell her the correct story. I don't want to hear that you were the good guy and I was the bad guy, because you always make yourself the good guy in your version of the story. And she knows, we all know you're a liar, and you lie to make yourself look good. So I'm not going to tolerate that in this situation. You need to knock it off. You need to get your act together. And you need to be a 32-year-old. At least act like one, because right now you're a 16-year-old. And that's what I said. And this girl, you should have seen her face, was like so white. And it is very funny to watch, because like when I watch my own videos, it's very funny to watch myself give threats, because it's like that doesn't really comprehend. Like, you know, and that's exactly what her face was. Like, you literally, Megan, you called me out on every single thing. Like, you literally, I can't believe what you just said to me. You told me exactly what I didn't want to hear, and I don't like that you told me what I didn't want to hear, because you're younger than me, and, you know, I'm supposed to be the one in charge, you know, and now you just embarrass, and I wouldn't say that I embarrassed her, because again, it was like 1-to-1. But yeah, but anyway, that's what I did entry level. And that's what I had to deal with entry level. It was very, very annoying and very frustrating. And I wouldn't recommend that you go ahead and you tell people that. As a manager, you can do that. Like, especially if it's harming their quality of work, which in this case, it was harming both of our qualities of work. I'll be perfectly honest, like the ending result of our argument, it was just kind of like flatlined. My supervisor, I will say, she handled it like what she ended up doing was she heard one side of the story, she heard the other side of the story, one side, other side, one side, other side. And then it was pretty much like, okay, I hear what you're saying. How can I help to make the situation better? And so it didn't necessarily, I wouldn't say that my supervisor was bad in this situation, but she didn't necessarily handle it I don't know. She didn't solve the problem. It wasn't good, but it wasn't bad. And as a supervisor, you know, I would have, if two employees come up to me and they're fighting over whatever, like I said, I don't have patience for that. And it better not harm the patients that they're servicing. And that's like, I guess that's my major goal, is that your argument, like, I don't know if it's personal issues, I don't know if it's work-related issues, but you better not harm the patients. Like, you better do your job description to the best of your ability despite this argument, and then figure out whatever your personal issue is outside of work, because I don't want you to harm. I'm not paying you to argue, and I'm not paying you to not do a good job. And that's, I guess, how I would have handled the situation. But the point that I'm trying to make is that when you become entry level, you have rights. If you're working with somebody and they're not treating you right, and that's exactly what was going on in this situation, and that's why I got all fired up. Like, you have a right to call somebody out. You have a right to call them into the office. You have a right to talk to your supervisor about this person. And don't let people walk all over you, especially if they are the same position as you. Age does not matter. Experience matters, okay? Like, shadowing, I mean, if you think about my application, like, I have so many clinical experiences, so many shadowing experiences, and yes, I'm more qualified than a 22-year-old, but yeah, okay, I'm like 2 years older than a 22-year-old, but it's not necessarily the age that matters, it's the experience that matters. It's the mental maturity that matters, and that can come at any age, you know, like, you could accomplish a billion things when you're 10 years old, or you could accomplish a little bit when you're 32, like this girl. And the point that I'm trying to make is that you shouldn't let people step all over you. If you feel angry with somebody at work, or somebody is, like, you know, getting on your nerves, or, you know, making it difficult for you to do your job, which in this situation, this girl was a total bully at work, then you can voice it, and you can voice it to that specific person, especially if they're the same age as, like, the same level as you. Now, on terms of the supervisors, geez, I'm not going to talk about this too much, but I've had a disaster of supervisors as a music therapist. And honestly, so like I mentioned before, most of my supervisors were creative arts therapists, nurses, or healthcare administration. So none of these people understood what music therapy was, and most of these people, this was like their first management job, okay? So not only did they not understand what I did, but they never were a manager before. And like I said, it's really intrinsic. Like, being a manager is an intrinsic ability. And then if you have the skill set on top of it, then you're just wonderful, you know? So anyway, so when you're practicing for 3 to 4, 5 years in, like, direct care, like a nurse, like a creative arts therapist, you don't necessarily, I mean, I don't understand why it would take somebody 5 years to actually mentally be ready to be a supervisor. Like, that, to me, that seems a little too long. And that's exactly what happened. These people stayed at their positions for, like, stayed at their direct care positions for, like, way too long, and then became, you know, a manager. And there's only so much you can teach somebody, like, after you reach a certain age, if that makes sense. So that's exactly what was happening. And these managers, just to also give you a little spectrum, these managers were between the ages of, like, 27 and 30, okay? So, and like I said, it's not the age, it's the experience. But when there's somebody like me who's young, who had a lot of clinical experience and clinical hours coming in, and then there's somebody who's only, like, a little bit older, you know. I wouldn't say that I don't think that like 28 and like 22, I don't really think there's that much of an age difference, you know. Like 22-year-olds date 28-year-olds, you know. But like when you're coming in and you're 22, 21, 22, and your supervisor is 27, 28, and they get very, very intimidated by you, especially as a music therapist, because you've had all this clinical training. You literally jumped through hoops to become a music therapist, and then they kind of coasted at their jobs, right? Because they stayed at their jobs for like 3, 4, 5 years. And now they're a manager. They often feel intimidated. And I think that on Gilmore Girls, Paris Gilmore says it the best, you know, the younger generation, they're coming for us. They're gonna take our starter husbands, they're gonna take our jobs. Well, she's right, because you know, when they see you coming in there with all this clinical experience and all this training, they think like, oh my God, they're coming for me. And it is important to stand your ground. Like I said, you don't want to be bowing down to these supervisors. You really want to take their corrections in, like you want to take it in with a grain of salt, especially if they're not music therapists. Now, I did have a music therapy supervisor one time, and she was about 50, 55-ish, and she was a music therapist. And when she gave advice, she gave it, I would say she was very respectable in the way she gave the feedback. She was very easy to talk to, and I wouldn't say that I bowed down to her, but I actually took her advice into more consideration than when my nursing supervisor gave me advice, because usually when the nursing supervisor gives you feedback on your sessions, it's not necessarily like, usually it's not related. And that's often what tended to happen in this situation. Like, I'm not going to say that I didn't respect, like I definitely respected my supervisors, because they knew how to work. They knew what it was like to be a worker for that many years, and I didn't, you know. But when it came to giving clinical feedback, their clinical feedback wasn't all that great. Like rec therapists, for example, they often, or I would say creative arts therapists, but you know, with a recreation background, they often would give like, oh, you have to have high energy, oh, you have to do new sessions. Like, and that's not necessarily like appropriate, because especially if you're working with adults, high energy is not appropriate. Doing new sessions for different clients is not necessarily feasible as a music therapist. Nursing supervisors often gave me feedback like, oh, why, like, you know, why was your session only 45 minutes when it's supposed to be an hour? Oh, because so-and-so's wife came to visit and, you know, they didn't want to do music therapy together. Or like, oh, why didn't you see Mr. Jones on Wednesday? Oh, Mr. Jones was out with his daughter. That was like kind of, oh, well, let me know, like, well, you need to let me know ahead of time, like, where the patients are and why, you know, they're not getting services. And that was the feedback, and that's not necessarily, like, has anything to do with music therapy, right? And then healthcare administration, it was more of an advocacy game than actual session feedback. It was always like, oh, why are you asking for a raise? Like, why are you working, and you know, you're going over 40 hours, why? It was more money advocacy. So that's a little feedback for you guys, what it's like to have supervisors in the working world. I would say that it's not okay. If you're having an issue with the supervisor, definitely go to HR, definitely go, maybe even go to your boss like I did in my internship story. But don't talk back to your supervisor. You definitely want to keep your enemies closer if you don't get along with your supervisor. If you don't get along with somebody that has the same position as you, feel free to lash it out, because I did. And the main reason why I did is because I didn't necessarily feel safe. I didn't necessarily feel wanted. I didn't necessarily feel like an employee. And that's very, very important. You need to be treated as an employee. You have rights. you have gone through, like I said, you jumped hoops. You did everything correct. You followed the standard procedure. So you should be treated with just as much as respect as the nurses. You should be treated with just as much respect as the people that don't have degrees that are 32 years old. You should be treated with just as much respect as the CNAs. CNAs don't necessarily get a lot of respect from the higher ups, but on the floor they get a lot of respect. But the point is that you are an employee and you should be treated as such. I don't care if you're 21. I don't care if you're 22. I don't care if it's your first job. You need to be treated as an employee, bottom line. And you need to keep it, and you need to stay strong, and you need to advocate for yourself, and you need to stand tall. If wearing heels works, because that's what I do to make myself a little bit taller, it does intimidate the scared people that try to take advantage of me. So if that works for you, then go for it. But you need to be treated as an employee. You need to know your self-worth. As a music therapist, you need to know that you are wonderful and should be treated as such. Okay. Have a great day, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye.